The Lighthouse That Guides Lost Dreams, a Moondrift Sleep Story. Hello, my friend. Welcome back. My name is Michael, and it is my great privilege, as always, to be the voice you come home to at the end of the day. To be the one who sits with you in the dark and tells you that the world outside can wait. It will all be there in the morning. Every errand, every worry, every noise of it, exactly where you left it. But for now, for this quiet stretch of hours that belongs only to you, I want to take you somewhere. Somewhere I have been going in my mind for a very long time. A place I only discovered, if I'm honest with you, because I stopped running long enough to find it. But before we travel there together, let's take just a few moments. Let's slow everything down. I'm going to count down from 10 to 1. And as I do, I want you to allow yourself to arrive. Not just in your bed or on your couch or wherever it is your body rests tonight. I mean, really arrive. Let the day dissolve behind you the way ink dissolves in water. Not gone entirely, but so spread through everything that it no longer has any particular shape or weight. 10. Feel the surface beneath you. The press of it against your back, your shoulders, the backs of your arms. There's something quietly miraculous about that, you know? The fact that something holds you. That you do not have to hold yourself up tonight. That gravity itself is doing you a kindness, drawing you gently down into stillness. 9. Take a breath now. Not a forced one, not a performed one. Just let the air come in because your body wants it. And then let it go because your body is finished with it. That is all breathing is, really. A giving and a receiving. A small conversation your body has been having with the world since the very first moment you were here. 8. Notice any tension that is still sitting in you tonight. It might be in your jaw, which so many of us hold like a locked door. It might be across your shoulders or in the particular kind of tightness that lives just behind the eyes. You do not need to force anything to let go. Simply noticing is usually enough. Simply saying to that place in your body, "Hello, I see you, you can rest now." 7. The thoughts that are still moving through your mind are not enemies. They are simply the last few leaves falling from the day. Let them fall. Watch them the way you might watch the last embers settling in a fire. Not with concern, not trying to relight anything, just watching them lose their brightness and become ash, and then become nothing at all. 6. You are safe. I want you to feel that truth somewhere deep in you right now. Whatever the day asked of you, whatever it took, whatever it left unfinished, none of it can reach you here. Here, in this moment, in this dark, you are safe in the most complete and unargued way. There's nothing required of you. Not even sleep if it does not come immediately. There is only this breath, and then this one, and then the one after that. 5. Let a little softness in now, if you can. A kind of permission. Permission to stop being efficient, to stop managing, to stop holding the shape of the person the world needs you to be during the day. Underneath all of that is someone much quieter and much older. Someone who knows how to be still. Let them come forward now. 4. Begin very gently to let your imagination stir. Not the anxious, planning kind of imagination. The other kind. The deep, unhurried kind that surfaces only when the day is truly over and you have nowhere to be. The kind that knows how to find water in dry places and light in dark ones. 3. Think of the sea. Not a wild sea, not a dramatic one, but the sea at night, when the wind has quieted and the water has become very dark and very still, and the surface of it catches the light from somewhere far away and holds it, broken up and glittering, the way a mirror dropped on a stone floor might hold light in all its pieces. 2. Let your body go heavier now. Let the last little bits of holding go. You have been carrying things all day long, and you have carried them well enough. But this is the part of the night when you are allowed to set them down. Set them down gently, the way you would set down something fragile, knowing you can pick them up again when you need them, but that you do not need them here. And 1. Completely letting go now. as I take you somewhere I have been wanting to take you for a very long time. A place that exists at the edge of the world, at the edge of sleep, in the particular kind of country that lives between waking and dreaming. A place with a lighthouse. There is a map that most cartographers never draw. It is not a map of land masses or coastlines, not a map of roads or river systems or mountain ranges. Those maps are useful enough, and the world is full of them, but they only ever chart the outside of things. What I am talking about is a different kind of geography entirely. A map of the inner country. The place you travel to every night without quite knowing how you got there, without a passport or a bag, without remembering the moment of departure. The landscape you have visited 10,000 times, and yet cannot quite describe when morning comes and someone asks you where you went. Most people assume that sleep is simply an absence. The day switches off, and the dark comes in and nothing happens until the alarm sounds and the day switches back on again. But anyone who has ever paid real attention to the hours they spend in the dark, and there are not many of us who do, it takes a certain kind of patience and a certain kind of quiet, knows that something far more complex is taking place. The ancients knew it. The Greeks knew it so well that they built an entire mythology around it, populated with gods whose sole purpose was to tend to what happens when the eyes close and the conscious mind steps aside. They understood that sleep was not nothing. Sleep was a country, and it needed its keepers. The god they called Hypnos was the son of Night herself, Nyx, the old primordial darkness, who was so powerful that even Zeus treated her with careful respect. And Hypnos, the child of that ancient dark, was the keeper of sleep. He lived in a cave deep in the underworld, through which the river Lethe ran its slow, forgetful course. The river of forgetfulness, the Greeks called it, and in the cave of Hypnos, the water of it ran softly over smooth stones, and its sound was the sound of everything being gently dissolved. Worries, memories too sharp to hold without bleeding, the particular exhaustion that comes not from the body but from somewhere deeper than the body. All of it given to the river, carried away. Around Hypnos on his soft couch slept his children, the Oneiroi, the 1,000 personified spirits of dreams, each one a different kind of vision, a different kind of experience, waiting to be released into the sleeping world. And among all his children, there was one who was trusted above the others to move between the world of sleep and the world of waking. His name was Morpheus, and his name came from the Greek word for form, for shape, because what Morpheus did was give shape to the shapeless. He took the raw material of a sleeping mind, all its memories and fears and longings and joys, and the 1,000 impressions the day had pressed into it, and he made something from them, something vivid and strange, and sometimes beautiful and sometimes terrifying, but always, in the deepest sense, deeply true. Because Morpheus, for all the wild and impossible things he made, was never actually lying to you. He was simply telling you the truth in a language your waking mind was too busy to hear. The ancients also said that the land of dreams had 2 gates. One gate was made of ivory, and through it came the false dreams, the ones that mislead and confuse, the nightmares dressed in the clothing of possibility, the anxious loops that send you spiraling. The other gate was made of horn, and through it came the true ones, the ones that leave you when you wake, with a feeling you cannot quite name but cannot quite let go of either. A kind of ringing as though something important just happened, even if you cannot remember what it was. What the ancients did not say, and perhaps did not know, or perhaps knew and kept to themselves, as the ancients often did, was what happened to the dreams that got lost. Because some of them did. Get lost, I mean. Not every dream makes it to its destination. The land of sleep is vast, and the geography of it is not fixed the way waking geography is. A road that led somewhere last night may lead somewhere different tonight. A valley you have walked through 100 times may be entirely elsewhere when you next go looking for it. And so, sometimes, a dream sets out from the cave of Hypnos, passes through the gate of horn, and then wanders, goes a little astray, drifts off course in the particular darkness between deep sleep and the lighter shore. Those lost dreams needed something. A beacon, a light. The island does not appear on any chart. This is not because it is hidden exactly, or because anyone has deliberately kept it off the maps. It is simply that maps only record what the people who drew them had been, and very few people have been to the island. It sits somewhere in the sea between sleeping and dreaming, in the channel that navigators of the inner world used to call the Somnian Passage, a long, dark strait where the water is very still and very deep, and where a particular quality of quiet lives that you do not find anywhere else. Not the quiet of emptiness, but the quiet of fullness. The quiet of a room in which everything important has been said, and no more words are needed. The island is small enough to walk across in an hour, if you keep a steady pace, and do not stop to look at things, which on this island is nearly impossible, because the things worth looking at are everywhere. It is made entirely of gray and silver stone, the kind of stone that shows its grain in the rain, long horizontal striations that suggest age and patience, as though the rock has been lying here long enough to have grown wise about being still. The cliffs on the western side drop straight into the sea from a height of perhaps 30 or 40 feet, and at their base, the water works at the stone in a slow and unhurried way, not crashing and violent, but rhythmically, regularly, like a very patient craftsman who knows there is no need to rush. On the eastern side, the island opens up into something gentler. The stone slopes down to a small shingle beach made of dark gray pebbles that have been worn perfectly smooth over an uncountable number of years, each one round and cool to the touch, each one a particular shade of gray or black or deep charcoal that looks very nearly green when the water runs over it. Beyond the shingle beach, the sea is shallow for a stretch, pale and translucent, and quietly lit from within, not by anything you can see, not by any visible light source, but by what appears to be an inherent luminescence in the water itself, a soft and steady glow that has no particular color, but which is somehow not quite no color either. It is the color of deep rest, if deep rest had a color. It is the color of the particular peace that comes just before genuine sleep. Somewhere in the middle of the island, not visible from the beach and not visible from the cliff tops, there is a spring. It is the kind of spring that does not announce itself. You come upon it by way of a slight depression in the stone, a darkening of the lichen on the rocks, a change in the quality of the vegetation from sparse and salt-hardened to something softer and more generous. And then, there it is, a small pool, not more than a meter across, perfectly circular as though someone carved it, filled with water that comes up from somewhere very deep in the rock and arrives at the surface at a constant temperature that is slightly warmer than the air around it, so that on cold mornings there's a very faint mist above the pool, a ghostly breathing that rises and dissolves before it has risen more than a foot above the water's surface. The water from this spring has a particular quality to it that is not quite describable in purely chemical terms. Though the chemistry is interesting enough, slightly sulfurous, slightly mineral, carrying in solution the particular combination of dissolved elements that the rock has been contributing to it over thousands of years of slow and patient percolation. The ancients, in the places where springs like this occurred in the waking world, recognized that something was present in the water, beyond its physical constituents. They built small sanctuaries at such springs, left offerings, carved niches in the rock nearby for small lamps or sticks of incense. They believed that the god who governed the water, whichever local deity had custody of the source, deserved acknowledgement. Not worship in the grand theatrical sense, not necessarily a full ritual, but a simple regular recognition, a nod, an offering, a moment's pause before drinking. On this island, there's a small carved shelf in the rock beside the spring at about chest height, and on the shelf the keeper keeps a small clay cup. When you are thirsty on this island, and you will be if you have been walking the cliff paths in the sea wind, you come to the spring and you fill the cup and you drink slowly. The water tastes of stone and of cold and of something else, something that has been traveling a long way through the dark to reach you, and drinking it produces a quiet that is specific to this water and nowhere else. The ancient Greeks believed that the right water could calm a troubled mind more effectively than philosophy. In the cave of Hypnos himself, the river of forgetfulness ran over its smooth stones, and its sound was the sound of the mind becoming less crowded. There is something in the water of this spring that is not so different from that, if you are willing to sit with it for a moment and let it work. The keeper fills a small jug from this spring each morning and carries it down to the building at the base of the lighthouse tower. And this is what the tea is made from. The tea itself is brewed from the dried flowers of the night-blooming plants from the valley, picked at the moment of their fullest opening, which is the deep middle of the night, when the island is entirely dark, except for the lighthouse beam and the stars and the faint interior luminescence of the shallow eastern water. Picking them at that hour is important, the keeper has explained, though the explanation for why it is important is one of those explanations that is technically complete, but does not quite satisfy. Something about the concentration of the volatile compounds that give the flowers their smell being at its highest at the moment of fullest bloom. Something about chemistry and timing. But there's also the simpler, harder to argue explanation, which is that things gathered in the right spirit at the right time have a different quality than the same things gathered carelessly or in haste, and that this is not sentimentality, but observation, and that anyone who has spent enough time paying careful attention to the material world has noticed it. In the interior of the island, which is reached by a narrow path that winds up from the shingle beach through tufts of seagrass and low scrubby plants that grow in the cracks of the rock and manage somehow to flower despite everything, despite the wind, despite the salt, despite the long gray winters. In the interior, there's a small valley, protected on all sides from the weather, kept sheltered by the high stone arms of the island's ridges. This valley catches warmth in a way that the exposed cliff tops do not. In summer, if you can call the seasons here by the names the waking world uses, there are wildflowers in this valley. Not the spectacular kind, not the kind that dazzle you and demand you notice them. The quiet kind. Tiny white flowers that grow very close to the ground and smell very faintly of something warm and sweetly familiar, the way a scent from childhood sometimes returns to you years later with its whole world attached to it. Small blue flowers, barely visible among the stems of the seagrass, that only open in the deepest part of the night. Yellow flowers, 5-petaled, that close during the day and open at dusk, which in this place is a very particular event. Not a gradual dimming of light, but a slow and deliberate transition, as though the sky is deciding very thoughtfully to become something different. And at the highest point of the island, at the top of the ridge above the western cliffs, where the stone is bare and the wind moves freely and the sea stretches away in all directions until it meets the dark horizon and cannot be distinguished from the sky. At that highest point, there is the lighthouse. It is not a grand lighthouse. It would be wrong to describe it as grand, and this is important, because the island and everything on it is not trying to impress you. There is no grandeur here in the usual sense, no attempt to be more than it is, no performance of magnificence. The lighthouse is simply what it needs to be, built on that understanding, which is a kind of perfection in itself, if you think about it. A perfection that has nothing to prove. The tower is perhaps 20 meters tall, built of the same gray stone as the island itself, so that on overcast days, it seems to grow directly from the rock beneath it, with no visible seam between the stone of the ground and the stone of the building. The mortar between the stones is old and has settled into the gaps, with the complete comfort of something that has been in the same place for a very long time. The walls are thick, nearly a meter thick at the base, and this thickness makes the interior of the tower a place of particular quiet, even when the wind outside is loud, because the stone absorbs sound the way deep water absorbs light. You can hear the sea from inside, but only just, muffled, distant, the way you hear rain when you are warm inside and looking out. The door is set into the south face of the tower, low enough that an adult must duck slightly to pass through it, and it is made of wood that has spent so many years in the salt air that it has become something between wood and driftwood. A deep silver gray, smooth on the face, but slightly fibrous at the edges, with all the resin long since drawn out of it and replaced by a kind of marine patience. The hinges are iron, dark with rust that is not damaging the metal, but simply part of it now, the way a scar becomes part of a face and would be strange to remove. Inside the tower, a spiral staircase winds upward around a central stone column. The stairs are narrow and the stone is worn in the center of each step, where the weight of all the feet that have climbed this staircase over all the years has left its impression, a gentle concavity, like the hollow worn in a stone threshold by generations of passage. This is one of the most quietly moving things about old stone buildings, if you take the time to notice it. The worn places are not damage. They are record. They are the accumulated weight of all the people who came before. The walls of the stairwell are whitewashed, a shade of white that is slightly yellowed by time and salt damp, and someone, at some point long ago, has scratched small drawings into the plaster. Not as vandalism, there is no destructiveness in them, but as communication, as the small human need to say, I was here, I passed through this place, I was awake in this moment. There are ships drawn with the casual confidence of someone who spent their life looking at ships and no longer needed to think about how they looked. There are what appear to be star charts, tiny constellations mapped in rough but accurate clusters on the whitewashed wall, as though someone who climbed this staircase every night needed to keep the sky's geography clear in their mind even when they could not see the sky. There are names in several different languages, some of which are no longer spoken anywhere in the waking world. And here and there, between the ships and the stars and the names, there are small drawings of something that takes a moment to recognize. Closed eyes, dozens of them, drawn with quiet care, each one slightly different. Some with long lashes, some with the corners turned upward in what might be a slight smile, some with the lids so smoothly shut they look like the smoothest stones on the shingle beach below. All of them at rest, all of them deeply, peacefully, completely at rest. Whoever drew them understood something about this place. This is a place of sleep. This is a place where rest is not weakness or defeat or something to apologize for. Where rest is the whole point. Where the act of closing one's eyes is not an ending but a beginning of a different kind of being awake. At the top of the stairs, beyond a low wooden door set in the stone, is the lantern room. The lantern room is where everything happens. It is not large. 8, perhaps 9 paces across. Circular, encased on all sides by thick glass panels set in iron frames. At its center is the great lens, a Fresnel lens, which is a particular kind of lens that was invented in the 19th century by a French physicist named Augustin Jean Fresnel, who understood that the old way of making lenses was needlessly wasteful, because most of the heavy, expensive glass was doing nothing useful at all. The old lenses were enormous, solid, curved pieces of glass, most of which simply sat there being heavy, while only a thin, curved shell near the surface did the actual work of bending the light. What Fresnel did was extraordinary in its simplicity. He threw away all the unnecessary middle and kept only the working surface. He cut the curve of the lens into a series of concentric rings, each one angled just right to bend the light in the correct direction, and then he stacked them. The result was a lens that could be made flat, thin, and light as a wafer, while doing exactly the same job as the great heavy curved lens it replaced, gathering light from a source at its center and throwing it outward in a powerful focused beam that could be seen for miles across the water. When a Fresnel lens is fully assembled and set around its light source, and the light is on, it is one of the most beautiful things the human eye has ever made. The rings of glass catch the light from every angle simultaneously, and the lens itself seems to glow from within, not with the raw light of the lamp at its heart, but with a softer, more complex radiance, as though the light is being translated by the lens into something richer, something that has had thought put into it before it goes out into the world. The lens in this lighthouse is not lit by any lamp you would recognize. Or rather, it is lit, but the source of its light is harder to name than the light itself. If you stood outside the lighthouse on the island at night and looked up, you would see the beam. You would see it sweep slowly around its full revolution, one complete turn every 42 seconds, measured exactly, dependable as breathing. And where it swept across the water, it made a brightness that was not quite white and not quite gold. It was the color of the moment, just before waking, when the dark is still mostly dark, but something at the very edge of it has begun to soften. It was the color of the feeling you have when a deep and peaceful sleep is coming for you and you can feel it coming. The way you feel a warm front moving through a room before it fully arrives. If you watch the beam long enough, you might begin to notice something else. Things moved in it, not things you could properly see or name, not objects with defined edges, more like impressions, the way you sometimes catch something in your peripheral vision that is gone before you can turn to look at it properly. But in the beam of this lighthouse, those peripheral impressions were constant and varied and utterly unhurried in their movement, the way clouds move on a day when there is barely any wind, with a kind of enormous, lazy certainty about their direction and destination. Those were the dreams, the lost ones, the ones that had wandered off course in the dark passage between Hypnos Cave and the sleeping mines they were heading for. They drifted through the night like small boats that had somehow come loose from their moorings, not in distress, not panicking, simply at large and without direction, spinning slowly in the dark with no particular heading. And the lighthouse found them. The beam swept across the darkness of the Somnian passage and caught them, and they turned instinctively, the way any vessel turns toward a known light, and they followed it home. Home meaning you. The keeper of this lighthouse has been here for as long as anyone can remember. This is not unusual, or it is not unusual here. The kind of time that passes on the island does not quite correspond to the kind of time that passes in the waking world, and the keeper has never been concerned enough about the discrepancy to look into it very carefully. The keeper is not an old person exactly, and not a young one. There is an agelessness to the keeper of this place that is not the agelessness of someone who has simply been lucky with their appearance. It is the agelessness of someone who has been doing something very important for a very long time and has grown so entirely suited to the work that they and the work have become the same thing, and you cannot look at one without seeing the other. The keeper's name is, well, this is the thing. The keeper has a name, but it is one of those names that belongs so entirely to the person that it seems wrong to say it out loud to someone who has not met them yet, as though saying a name before you know its owner is a kind of presumption, a shortcut that robs the meeting of something it deserves. You will know the keeper's name when you know it. For now, let's say only that the keeper is the sort of person who seems to have chosen this existence very deliberately, with a full understanding of what was being chosen, which makes them rare in any world. Before the island, the keeper lived in the ordinary way. This is something the keeper speaks about occasionally, not with regret and not with nostalgia, but with a kind of clear-eyed retrospective understanding. The way you look back at a road you have come a long way from and can see, from the distance, its entire shape in a way you could not see when you were walking it. The ordinary life was not a bad life. That is important to say. It was full of real things, real people, real work, real seasons, real food and drink, and the small accumulated pleasures of a life that is paying attention to itself. But there was also in it a particular kind of noise that is difficult to describe to someone who is still inside it, because from inside it does not seem like noise exactly. It seems like reality. It seems like what things are. The noise the keeper means is not literal sound. It is more like a quality of constant demand. The demand to be responsive, to be available, to be relevant, to keep up, to stay current, to be productive, to be improving, to be working towards something, to be moving, always forward, always faster. The world the keeper lived in before was very good at producing this noise, and very bad at acknowledging that it was noise at all, preferring to describe it as engagement, as ambition, as the proper use of a life. And the keeper for a long time believed this, not because the keeper was foolish, but because the keeper was human. And this is what the ordinary world tells humans from a very early age, and repeats with great consistency and considerable conviction throughout their lives, that the goal is to arrive somewhere, that the happiness you are looking for is at the end of a series of correctly accomplished steps, that if you can just get this degree, and then that job, and then this house, and then those achievements, and then that recognition, if you can just assemble the right collection of outcomes, then the thing you are actually after, which is the quiet and the ease and the sense of being enough, will finally be yours. The keeper went through this faithfully and reached the end of it and found that the thing was not there. Not because the steps had been wrong, not because the outcomes hadn't been achieved, but because it was never there. The quiet was not a destination. The ease was not a reward. They were a practice, and a practice can only be found by practicing, and the practicing can only happen now, in this moment, in this specific lived experience, and not at some future point when the conditions have been optimally arranged. The keeper came to the island not because the island was looking to be found, but because the keeper had finally stopped moving long enough for the island to become visible. This is how it works. The island does not advertise itself. It does not recruit. It does not make promises or present arguments or issue invitations. It simply sits at the edge of the Somnian passage, with its lighthouse turning and its spring running and its night blooming flowers opening at the dark hour, and it waits for whoever has stopped running long enough to see the light. The keeper saw the light and arrived, and has been here since, doing the one essential and complete work of keeping the beam turning so that the lost dreams can find their way home, which turns out to be, as it turns out to be, with all the quietest and most enduring kinds of work, exactly enough. By day, when the beam is not needed, the keeper tends the island. This involves rather more than you might expect from a small piece of rock in the middle of a dream sea. The seagrass in the valley needs attention, not weeding exactly, but a kind of careful reading, the way you would read a letter from someone you care about, looking for the places where something might be wrong, where a plant is struggling, or where the soil is too thin, or where a late frost has touched something that ought not to have been touched. There are birds on the island, small brown birds that nest in the crevices of the cliff tops and spend their days in low, fast, almost horizontal flight across the surface of the sea, barely lifting before the next wave comes and occasionally dipping their wings into it, with an audacity that seems either very brave or very reckless, depending on what kind of morning you are having. The keeper knows each of them. Not by name, birds do not particularly need human names, but by their individual ways of being, the way one among them always flies slightly to the left of the others, or the way another has a call that is a half note lower than the standard call of the species, a variation so small that most ears would miss it entirely, but that the keeper has noted and cataloged in the particular internal library that keepers of this kind of place tend to maintain. By evening, as the sky over the western sea begins to do what the sky does here at dusk, which is something so slow and so thoroughly saturated with color that the word sunset seems entirely insufficient for the event, the keeper begins the ritual of preparation. This, too, is more involved than it might seem. The lens must be checked for any imperfections in its alignment, any microscopic shift introduced by the particular quality of cold that settles into this island on clear nights. The light source, whatever it is and wherever it comes from, must be given what it needs to do what it does. And what it needs is difficult to describe in practical terms, but is something along the lines of attention, of presence, of someone who is genuinely, unhurriedly, and completely there with it. Then, the beam begins. There is no switch, no mechanical throwing of a lever or turning of a key. The light comes on the way, sleep comes on, when everything necessary for it has been attended to, gradually and then all at once. The way warmth returns to cold hands by the fire, first at the edges, then spreading inward. The lens catches the first of the light and begins its work of translation, and the beam sweeps out across the dark water of the Somnian passage, and the dreams begin to come. The keeper watches them from the lantern room. They arrive in the beam before they arrive at the island. You can see them gathering in it, those half-visible shifting shapes, growing gradually more distinct as they draw nearer, until at the closest point, they are almost recognizable. Almost. The way you can almost remember something important that you know you knew. The memory present but not yet retrievable, hovering just inside the reach of your mind. They are that close to being graspable, that close to being named. And then they pass through the glass and they are gone, released into the night in the direction they were supposed to be going all along. And somewhere in the world that lies beyond the dark channel where the island sits, someone's dreaming deepens, and the quality of their sleep changes, and they wake in the morning with the residue of something lovely they cannot quite describe. The sea around the island at night is a subject unto itself. This is the thing about places that exist at the edges of ordinary reality. They tend to have weather of their own, atmospheres that do not correspond to what is happening in the broader world around them, as though the particular quality of the place creates its own climate, the way a mountain creates its own weather system, or the way a deep forest keeps its own temperature, regardless of the sun's position. The sea around the island is almost always still, not the dead stillness of water that has had the life taken out of it, but the particular stillness of water that is in a state of deep rest. You could stand on the western cliffs on a night like this and look down at the sea 40 feet below you and see the stars reflected in it with such precision that the surface of the water might be a second sky, a parallel sky lying face up in the dark, perfectly mirroring everything above it. You would not be able to tell for a moment which was the real one and which was the reflection. This is one of those experiences that sounds dizzying when described, but is in practice enormously calming, because the confusion of which sky is real brings with it a helpful reminder that the categories of real and reflected may be less fixed than we usually assume. The sound of the sea at night is a very specific sound. It is not the crashing of big surf, not the rhythmic thunder of waves against a stone beach. The water here on calm nights is so composed that it moves against the base of the cliffs in what is more like a breathing than a beating, a slow, regular exchange. The sea drawing in and then releasing, drawing in and releasing, each cycle so smooth and complete that listening to it produces almost immediately the same rhythm in your own chest. This is not coincidence. The ancient Greeks understood that the body and the world outside the body are in constant conversation, and that one of the primary languages of that conversation is rhythm. The heart speaks in rhythm. The lungs speak in rhythm. The sea speaks in rhythm. And when two things that share a language are brought close together, they begin to synchronize. The more you listen to the sea, the more your body begins to agree with it. The salt air over the island has a character to it that changes through the night. At dusk, when the warmth of the day is still rising from the stone and meeting the cooler air coming in from the sea, the air smells of something warm and dry and slightly mineral, the rock itself releasing what the sun put into it. There is a faint bitterness to it that is not unpleasant, the way very dark tea has a bitterness that is part of the pleasure. An hour after dark, the dry warmth of the rock has given way, and the sea takes over entirely. The air becomes cooler and fully marine, laden with the dimethyl sulfide that the plankton in the water exhale as they go about their business in the dark, a smell that the human nose has been finding deeply evocative for as long as humans have had noses, because it is the smell of life working, the smell of something enormously ancient, doing what it has always done. indifferent to the hours and the seasons and the affairs of the land, just endlessly and patiently alive in the cold, dark water. By midnight, when the beam from the lighthouse is at its fullest and the passage around the island is at its most traveled, the air has settled into something you could only call the smell of deep night. No flower or perfume captures it entirely. It is slightly sweet, slightly cold, slightly electric, and entirely impossible to replicate in any context other than its own. It is the smell of a world that is not performing for anyone, not presenting itself for examination or approval. A world that is simply being itself in the full privacy of the dark. If you could bottle this smell and open it in the middle of a difficult day, in a difficult meeting, in the particular airless environment of chronic busyness, you would feel something settle in your chest that had not been settled in a long time. You would remember that the world is still there, the real world, not the world of appointments and traffic and accounts and obligations, but the older, wider, deeper one that was here before all of that and will be hereafter, the one that keeps its rhythms regardless. The island has a small building attached to the base of the lighthouse tower. Not a cottage exactly, though the word is close. It is a single room built against the southern face of the tower, low and wide, with walls made of the same gray stone and a roof of dark slate that in the rain makes a sound like something very gentle and very persistent explaining itself. The windows are small but numerous, 3 on the south wall, 2 on the east, and the glass in them is old enough to be slightly irregular, so that what you see through them is not quite the world as a camera would record it, but the world as it looks when filtered through decades of hand-blown glass, slightly wavy, slightly softer than it is in strict optical reality, which turns out to be a very good way to look at the world, actually. The slight softening tends to bring out what is lovely in it and diminish what is harsh. Inside the building, there is a table, very plain, wood worn smooth, with a shallow bowl on it in which sits a small pool of water from the sea, and floating on the water are 2 or 3 of those tiny night-blooming flowers from the valley. There's a chair beside the table. There's a shelf of books, none of which have titles on their spines, which in this place is not an oversight but the point. Titles are a way of telling you what something is before you have opened it, and these books prefer to introduce themselves. There is a small iron stove in the corner, very old, with its feet made to look like the talons of a bird, and on nights when the air coming in off the sea is cold enough to warrant it, the stove has a fire in it that burns slowly and sends its warmth across the flagstone floor in a way that is deeply, specifically physical. You feel it first on the tops of your feet, and it moves gradually upward until it has reached your face, and your face has softened, and something behind your eyes has unclenched. This room is where the keeper spends the quiet hours of the night. Not sleeping, not yet, not while the beam is needed, but resting, being still, doing the thing that is perhaps the most radical thing a person in any world can do, which is simply to be present in one place without wanting to be anywhere else. The keeper knows the particular quality of contentment this produces and does not take it for granted. There was a time, the keeper has told the few people who have ever made it as far as this island and this room. We will come to how they got here in a moment. There was a time before this place, before this work, when contentment felt like something that was always happening somewhere slightly out of reach. You could see the edges of it sometimes. You could feel the warmth coming from it the way you feel a fire before you have quite rounded the corner to see it. But it never seemed to fully arrive. It seemed always to be a consequence of something else, contingent on the right circumstances lining up, the right outcomes being achieved, the right version of your life finally settling into place. And then there was this: one room, one stove, one night, sky through irregular glass, the sound of the sea breathing below the cliffs, the sweep of the beam from the tower above, turning its patient 42-second circles through the dark, the lost dreams moving through it toward their proper destinations. The birds settled in their cliff-top crevices, the flowers open in the valley. Enough, the keeper says. This is enough. Not in the way that means settling for less than you deserve, in the way that means that what is here, right now, in this moment, is genuinely sufficient and genuinely whole, and that the search for more of it was perhaps always slightly beside the point. Very occasionally, someone finds the island, not by sailing there, and not by the exercise of will or planning. The island cannot be found that way. It does not appear to deliberate navigation. It does not respond to the kind of searching that knows in advance what it is looking for. The people who find it by accident, which is to say they find it by being still enough and tired enough and open enough that the island notices them and makes a small adjustment to its position in the dream sea, and they wash up on the shingle beach like a piece of beautifully weathered driftwood, not damaged exactly, but shaped by a long time of being moved around by forces larger than themselves, and ready now, finally, for a shore. A woman arrived once who had been carrying a grief so heavy and so long carried that it had begun to feel like her actual weight. She did not know this was what it was. She only knew that for a very long time she had been tired in a way that sleep did not fully fix, and that there was a kind of gray at the edges of things that was not visible to anyone else, but was entirely real to her. She woke on the shingle beach with the cool gray pebbles against her cheek and the sound of the sea at her feet and a quality of light in the sky above her that she could only describe afterward as gentle. She stayed for a time, she said. She did not know how long in waking world terms, a night, a week, a season. That kind of time does not translate. She walked the island. She sat in the valley among the night-blooming flowers. She climbed the lighthouse stairs slowly, running her fingers along the carved stars in the whitewashed plaster, reading the names she could not read and somehow feeling them anyway. She sat with the keeper for a while, in the room at the base of the tower, in front of the iron stove, with its bird-talon feet, and they did not talk very much. There was a tea, she said. She did not know what it was made of, but it tasted of something warm and slightly sweet and faintly of the sea, and drinking it was one of the purest physical pleasures she had experienced in recent memory. When she left, and leaving happened the same way arriving had happened, without decision or deliberation, simply the growing sense that she was ready to go. She was not a different person. This is important. The island does not transform people the way Magic Island stories sometimes promise. It does not take the grief from you, or fix the thing that was broken, or hand you the solution to the problem you have been working on. It simply gives you, for a certain unspecified period, a rest from the weight of being you, a rest so complete and so trustworthy and so unhurried that when the weight comes back, and it comes back, the island makes no promises about that. You carry it differently, not lighter exactly, but differently, as though someone has shown you a slightly better angle. A man arrived who had not truly slept in a very long time. Not in the medical sense, not in the sense that he could not sleep at all. He slept, technically, he spent the required hours horizontal and unconscious. But he had not truly slept, had not had the experience, somewhere deep in the architecture of a night, of landing somewhere safe and warm and quiet, and staying there long enough for the body to do everything it needs to do in the dark when no one is asking anything of it. He arrived on the shingle beach on his back, looking up at the irregular glass of the island's particular sky, and the first thing he felt was the cool of the pebbles under his shoulder blades and the warmth of something above him, something soft and indirect, not the sun, but not nothing either. And he breathed in and then out, and the out-breath was the longest and most complete out-breath he had taken in a considerable time. He spent his time on the island mostly at the water's edge on the eastern side, where the sea was shallow and lit from within. He did not do much. He let the sound of the water do its work on his nervous system, which is a real and documented thing. The way rhythmic, non-threatening sound at a certain frequency begins to slow the electrical activity of the brain in a process that neuroscientists describe in terms of synchronized oscillations, but that feels, from the inside, like the particular and wonderful sensation of something very tightly wound beginning to unwind. Each wave a small and patient word, each retreat the pause between words. A very long and very slowly spoken sentence about the nature of stillness. And if you were patient enough to sit with it for long enough to hear the whole thing, he did. He slept on the shingle beach that night, in the lighthouse's moving light. And what happened in his sleep that night was the thing that the science of sleep was invented to describe and can never quite fully capture. The deep recovery that happens in stage 3 of the sleep cycle, when the brain waves slow to their longest and lowest, delta waves that roll through the cortex like very deep water, and the body does its maintenance, its repair, its careful restoration of everything that has been used and frayed and overworked, the immune system checking its inventories and restocking its shelves, the muscles releasing their last held tensions, the hippocampus beginning its nightly transfer of the day's accumulated data from short-term holding to long-term storage, like a very methodical archivist who comes on shift only after everyone else has gone home. He woke in the morning, or in what passed for morning on the island, which was a gradual warming of the sky over the eastern sea, the pale, translucent water going from silver to gold. And he lay there for a while before moving, because it had been so long since waking up had felt like this that he did not want to risk losing it by moving too quickly. He stared up at the sky. He noticed the birds beginning their cliff-face flights. He heard the keeper moving in the building at the base of the tower. He felt not fixed, not cured, but rested in the deepest way. Rested all the way down to the places that do not usually get rested. The places where the tiredness lives that is not tiredness from today, but tiredness from a long time ago. Stored carefully and patiently and waiting for exactly this. The science of what happens in sleep is genuinely extraordinary, and it is worth staying with it for a moment, because the world does not tell this story often enough. When you lie down in the dark and close your eyes, the first thing your body does, before sleep properly arrives in those first quiet minutes of lying still, is begin a careful and competent handover of responsibilities. The conscious mind, which has been on duty all day, sorting and assessing and reacting and making the 10,000 small decisions that make up a day in a life, begins to step back. Its grip on the tiller loosens. The boat of you begins to find its own course. In the first stage of sleep, which is so shallow that a noise or a touch will bring you immediately back to full waking, the brain starts to produce slower electrical waves, alpha waves giving way to theta waves, the rhythm of the brain slowing like a tide going out. Your body temperature begins to drop, very slightly, as the hypothalamus, a small and extraordinary structure, at the base of the brain that manages an astonishing number of your body's background processes, begins to redirect resources from temperature maintenance to repair. Your muscles begin to release the last of their held tension, the kind of tension that is so habitual you have stopped noticing it during the day. In some people, this release is perceptible as a sudden jerk, the hypnic jolt, the body noticing with brief alarm that it has let go. In the second stage, deeper now, the brain begins to produce what are called sleep spindles, bursts of rapid oscillation that appear in the electrical record like the teeth of a comb, regular and repeated. What these spindles are doing, neuroscientists believe, is performing a kind of protective function for your sleep, actively suppressing the external signals that would otherwise reach the sleeping brain and wake it. They are the brain's way of saying, nothing that is happening out there needs us right now. We are busy in here. Please hold. And then the third stage, the deep sleep, the place where the delta waves arrive. Long, slow, enormous waves that roll through the brain like swells on a deep sea. Nothing sharp about them, nothing urgent. This is where the body does its most important work. The growth hormone that maintains your body's tissues is released almost exclusively during this stage. The immune system is at its most active during this stage. The emotional processing that we need to make sense of difficult days happens here, not in the vivid dream theater of REM sleep, but in this quieter, deeper place, a gentle and mostly invisible sorting of what needs to be kept and what can be released. This is the stage that the lost dreams are trying to reach, not REM sleep, which most people think of when they think of dreaming. The vivid, narrative, almost theatrical dreams that happen in that final stage of each sleep cycle, 90 minutes or so into the night, when the brain returns toward waking level activity, while the body remains paralyzed and still. Those dreams are real and important, and have their own extraordinary role in the economy of the sleeping mind. But the deepest work, the most restorative work, happens in the stage before them, in the slow, dark, delta wave deep, in the place that the lighthouse is trying to guide you to. The beam sweeps, the dreams arrive, the night deepens, and somewhere in a sleeping brain, the long, slow waves begin. I want to tell you about one particular night on the island. Not a dramatic night. Not a night with any notable event, no storm, no unusual arrival on the shingle beach. Just a night that is worth describing because it is the kind of night that this island does extraordinarily well. The kind that asks nothing of you and gives you everything. It is autumn. The day has been clear and cold. The kind of clear that is particular to this latitude in this season. Not the sharp, declarative clear of summer, when the sky seems to be making a point of its own intensity, but the thoughtful clear of autumn, when the blue is slightly deeper and the quality of light in it is more considered, more inclined to take its time with the stones and the seagrass and the silver cliff tops. The sun has been low all day, and its low angle has had the effect of making all the shadows long and precise, each rock and grass stem throwing its thin, dark finger across the pale stone of the island. As the sun goes down over the western sea, the sky does something extraordinary. This is not unusual here. The sky over the western cliffs of this island performs every evening with a thoroughness and care that would seem excessive elsewhere, but here feels simply appropriate, as though the sky understands that it is performing for an audience of one, and that this particular audience has given up most of the things that distract most people from watching the sky, and that it owes that audience its full effort. The first color is a deepening of the blue directly overhead. Not a sunset color, not yet, but a concentration, an intensification, as though the blue is gathering itself. Then, at the horizon, where the sea and the sky meet in a line so precise and clean it seems hand-drawn, the first warm tones begin. Not red yet, not orange, but a kind of bronzed gold that has amber in it and copper and something else. Something that exists between those colors and has no proper name. Only the experience of it in the eyes and the particular quiet warmth it produces somewhere in the chest. The colors move upward slowly. That is the thing about a real sky. It moves in ways that are very difficult to predict and impossible to hurry. The gold becomes orange, but gradually, without announcement, the way opinions change, the way understanding deepens. The orange becomes rose. The rose has a depth to it that seems out of place in the sky, a richness, almost a velvetyness, that belongs more to fabrics or to flowers than to the vast, empty air. And above the rose, the blue has been deepening this whole time, going through stages of itself. And now at the zenith, it has become something that is almost not blue anymore, almost not any color the waking world has a word for, a shade that lives right at the border of blue and dark, the color of the very last degree of visible light. The first star appears, not dramatically, just quietly, a single point of steady light in the deep blue zenith overhead. Then another, and another. The sky begins to populate itself in the unhurried way of all the best things, each star arriving in its own time, not waiting to be noticed, simply appearing and remaining and letting the pattern build itself around it. And the keeper, standing at the base of the lighthouse tower, watching all of this with the complete and uncomplicated attention that only comes to people who have stopped needing to be anywhere else, takes in one long breath of the autumn sea air and then goes inside. The beam comes on. Tonight, the dreams that come through the beam are particularly varied. Some of them are what you might expect, the luminous and narrative kind, the ones that feel like films you are both watching and living in which you walk through buildings that shift and reconfigure themselves around you. Or you fly over landscapes of colors that do not exist in the waking world. Or you meet people you love who have been gone for years, and the meeting has all the warmth of the real thing and none of the grief, for the duration of the dream at least. These are the Morpheus dreams, shaped, human, storied. The ones that wake you sometimes with the specific and somewhat poignant feeling of having been somewhere and come back from it, and of not being entirely sure which place was more real. But there are others. Dreams that are not narrative at all, but purely sensory. Not a story, but a feeling. A sustained and uninterrupted quality of experience. A dream that is only the smell of a particular kitchen from childhood, warm bread and something sweet, and the particular quality of dusty sunlight through a curtain, and nothing else. No plot, no event, no resolution required. Simply that, the smell, for as long as it wants to last. This kind of dream is, in some ways, the most intimate of all the kinds, because it goes directly to the place where the true self lives, which is not in narrative and not in event, but in the body's oldest memories, the ones stored not in words, but in sensation, in smell and warmth and the particular weight of familiar air. There are wordless dreams. There are color dreams, pure waves of hue and tone, nothing shaped into object or figure, just color moving through the dark of the closed eye, like light moving through water. There are sound dreams, music that no one has composed and no one will remember, but which, while it lasts, is the most complete and satisfying thing the ear has ever received, arranged with a precision and a feeling that suggests it was put together by someone who knows you very well. All of these are real. Neuroscience does not entirely know why we dream. This is one of the things that makes sleep research so endlessly interesting. The smartest people who have spent their lives studying what happens in sleeping brains cannot fully agree on what the whole apparatus is for. Some researchers believe dreams are essentially the brain's garbage collection, that the vivid theater of REM sleep is the outward sign of the cortex clearing and reorganizing its filing system, discarding redundant neural connections, and strengthening the important ones. Others argue that dreams serve an emotional regulation function, that the sleeping brain processes difficult emotions at a remove through the metaphor and narrative of dreams, allowing you to work through experiences that would be too overwhelming to process directly while awake. Others still suggest that REM sleep is where the brain runs its simulations, rehearsing scenarios and building the models of the world and other people that you will use in waking life. They are probably all right. And perhaps also, none of them is entirely right. Perhaps the full account of why we dream includes all of these functional explanations, and also something they cannot quite capture, the simple, ancient, undeniable fact that dreaming is part of what it means to be the kind of animal we are, that we are dreaming creatures, that our minds have always worked this way, that the nightly journey into the country of sleep and back again is as natural and as necessary to us as eating and breathing, that the reason it is so hard to fully explain is the same reason it is hard to fully explain music, or the way certain landscapes make certain people feel things so large they have no words for them. Some things are larger than the explanations of them. This is not a failure of the explanations. It is a tribute to the thing. It is past midnight on the island now. The stars are fully out. The Milky Way, which in the waking world has been largely hidden from most people for decades by the accumulated light pollution of all our cities and roads and buildings. The glow we have collectively put into the sky. The light that goes up and stays there and turns the night sky from black to a dull amber gray over most of the places where people live. Here, over this island in the Somnian Passage, the Milky Way is entirely visible. Not as a vague impression, not as a slightly lighter stripe across the dark, but as what it actually is, a river of light, a dense and luminous band composed of something like 200 to 400 billion stars, each one a sun, some of them larger than our sun, and some of them smaller, and some of them in the process of being born, and some in the process of dying, and many of them with planets of their own, all of it visible here from this island on this clear autumn night, a river of ancient light running across the sky from one horizon to the other. The Keeper has been watching it for a very long time. This is one of the things about this work, the Keeper has said. You learn to hold very large and very small things simultaneously. The Milky Way on one hand, and the particular way the night-blooming flowers close in the valley at first light on the other. The sweep of the beam across the immensity of the Somnian Passage, and the sound of the iron stove settling as the fire burns low. The lost dreams of the sleeping world, numbering perhaps in the millions on any given night, finding their way through the light, and a single cup of something warm and quietly fragrant held between two hands in the small room at the base of the tower. There is no contradiction in this. This, the Keeper has come to understand, is the real content of a life lived well. Not the achievement of magnitude, not the single grand gesture that history remembers, not the climbing of heights so high that the air is thin and the view is dizzying, but you cannot actually breathe well enough to enjoy it. The real content is the movement between the large and the small, the ability to stand under the Milky Way and feel properly small in the best way, which is to say, relieved of the particular weight of believing yourself to be larger and more central to the operations of the universe than you are, and then to come inside and be entirely present with the small fire in the small room and the small cup and find that this too is complete, that the movement between the two does not diminish either, that the Milky Way makes the cup of tea no less real and no less warm, and the cup of tea makes the Milky Way no less immense and no less beautiful. This is what rest actually is, not the absence of the large things, not the retreat from the scale of the world, simply the ability to hold them all, the vast and the intimate, the ancient and the immediate, without being overwhelmed by any of them. To let the night be as big as the night is, and to let your body be as warm as the fire makes it, and to notice that both of these are gifts, and to receive them both, and to sit with them quietly in the particular gratitude that does not announce itself but simply lives in the quality of your attention. The beam turns. 42 seconds for a full revolution. 42 seconds in which the light sweeps the full circle of the horizon, catching what is there to be caught, drawing in what has wandered, guiding back toward their destinations, the small luminous shapes of the wandered dreams. Then back again. Then again. All night long, without interruption, without variation. The sea breathes below. The stars hold their positions overhead, turning their slow shared circle around the pole star, which does not move, which has been the fixed point of navigators for as long as navigators have needed a fixed point, which will continue to hold still for some large and unconcerned multiple of the length of any human life. You are lying in your bed right now, or on your couch, or wherever it is your body rests tonight in the waking world. Your body is already doing its work. It began the moment you lay down, the slow withdrawal of heat from the surface, the hypothalamus issuing its quiet instructions, the muscles releasing in degrees too small to feel individually, but that collectively amount to a profound and total softening. Your heartbeat has slowed by several beats per minute since you closed your eyes. The rate of your breathing has lengthened. Your blood pressure is falling gently toward the lower readings that the sleeping body produces and the waking body never quite achieves. All of this is happening without your direction, without your involvement, as automatically and as expertly as the lighthouse beam, turning its 42-second circles without anyone's hand on a switch. You do not have to make sleep happen. Sleep is already making itself happen. All you have to do is allow it. But some part of you, not the part that has to be at work tomorrow, not the part that is managing the budget and planning the conversation and worrying about whether the thing you said last week came out wrong, some older, quieter part of you knows this island, has been here before, has woken on that shingle beach with the cool gray pebbles against its cheek and lain there for a while before moving, because it had been a long time since waking up had felt like that, and it did not want to risk losing it by moving too quickly. That part of you is already on its way. It is in the dark of the Somnian Passage right now, drifting in the kind of unhurried way that the deep passage between waking and sleeping allows. The water around it is very still and very dark, and it has no particular fear of the dark out here, because the dark is simply the dark, not threatening, not ominous, simply the patient background against which all the important lights are visible. And visible they are, the stars above, reflected in the still water below, and there at the far edge of the passage, steady and certain and turning its 42-second circles through the night. The light. It sweeps across you, and for a moment you are entirely visible, lit up in the warm, not quite gold of it. Every detail of you clear and present and perfectly located in the dark. And then the beam moves on, and you are in the dark again, but a different dark. The dark of someone who knows where they are, who has seen the landmark and taken the bearing and adjusted course accordingly. The dark of someone going home. The island grows closer. You can smell it before you can see it clearly. That particular salt air, carrying its dimethyl sulfide, and its mineral cold, and its faint sweet trace of those night-blooming flowers in the valley that only open at this hour, only for this air, only for whoever is out in the dark tonight needing something to guide them in. You can hear the sea at the base of the cliffs, not dramatic, not urgent, just that slow and regular breathing, in and out and in and out, as patient as something that has been doing this for all the time there is, and has never found a reason to hurry. And beneath the sound of the sea, another sound, very faint, barely there but present if you are quiet enough to receive it. A low and steady tone, not mechanical, not produced by any instrument you have heard before, more like the sound of the island itself, resonating very gently in the dark, the way a tuning fork resonates after it has been struck. The sound of stone and water and air in a particular configuration, vibrating at the exact frequency of rest. The exact frequency that your nervous system has been trying to reach all day. The shingle beach comes up soft beneath you. Those dark gray pebbles, each one worn perfectly smooth over an uncountable number of years, cool against your skin. Each one its own particular shade of dark, gray-black, green-gray, the deep charcoal of cold water. You lie on your back for a while. The sky above is enormous. The Milky Way runs its river of ancient light from one horizon to the other. The stars are so numerous and so clear that the sky seems close, seems almost textured, a thing you could reach up and lay your hand on and feel the roughness of it. All those points of light pressing outward against the dark like very small bright seeds pushing through very dark soil. From somewhere in the interior of the island, from the direction of the valley, a smell of night-blooming flowers drifts down across the stone. Not heavy, not sweet in the way of cut flowers in a warm room. Subtle, the kind of subtle that rewards your noticing it rather than announcing itself to you. The kind that says, I am here for those who are paying attention. You breathe it in. Your chest rises and then falls, and then the fall is longer than you expected. Your exhale, simply continuing past the point where exhales usually stop, going on and on until your lungs are nearly empty. And then there is a pause, a beautiful pause, a moment of complete stillness in which there is no breath at all, no in and no out, just the perfect quiet of between. And then the next breath comes in of its own accord, unhurried, unforced, because the body knows how to breathe and does not need to be managed into it. Above you, From the top of the island's ridge, the lighthouse beam sweeps across the sky. 42 seconds for a full revolution. You count 3 revolutions on your back on the shingle beach, watching the beam move across the stars. And then you are not quite counting anymore. You're simply receiving. Not counting the seconds, but feeling them. And the feeling of them is the feeling of the island itself, which is the feeling of something very old and very reliable and very unhurried, doing exactly what it has always done, which is to hold the light so that the lost things can find their way. You close your eyes. Under your closed eyelids, in that interior dark that is lit now by the afterimage of the lighthouse beam, something very like rest begins. Not performed rest, not attempted rest, not rest you are working toward. Actual rest. The kind that arrives when you have stopped chasing it. The way the skittish animal that will not come when called will sometimes walk up and lay its head in your lap if you simply sit still long enough and stop wanting it to. The sound of the sea is all around you. Its rhythm is in your chest now, synchronized the way the ancients always suspected it would be. The body's own breathing matching the breathing of the sea. The two of them running together in the dark, like the 2 rivers in the old myths. The river of memory and the river of forgetting. Running side by side for a while before one of them finds its way down into the dark, where Hypnos sleeps and his children wait. Morpheus is on his way. Not the frightening kind, not tonight. Tonight he comes with what is behind the gate of horn. The true dreams, the ones that come with that quality of faint blue light, the ones that leave you when you wake with something you can almost hold. He comes with the warmth of the kitchen from your childhood and the smell of bread and the particular dusty gold of afternoon light through a curtain. He comes with the music that no one has composed, arranged specifically for this night, for you, by someone who knows you very well. He comes with the faces of people you love at their best, the versions of them you carry in the place behind memory, the versions that are present in you whether they are present in the world or not. He comes with the sea, with the lighthouse and its turning beam and the cool gray pebbles and the night-blooming flowers, and the keeper sitting in the room at the base of the tower with a small fire and a cup of something warm, and the Milky Way outside the irregular glass of the windows. He brings all of it in with him, and the delta waves begin to roll. If you are watching the island from above right now, from the height of the middle atmosphere, from the level where the weather looks like cotton and the sea below is a flat gray-blue disk with its little island in it, barely visible from up here, and the lighthouse beam is a very thin, moving thread of light, searching. If you were watching from up there, you would see something that is not visible from the surface. Threads of light converging on the island. Very faint, most of them. So faint that you would have to be looking for them specifically to see them at all. But they are there, coming from every direction, from over every horizon, from the full 360 degrees of the dark sea around this little rock. The lost dreams finding their bearing, correcting their drift, following the beam home. They come in all sizes. Some of them are tiny, barely visible. A small dream, a brief one, maybe only a few seconds worth of something warm, meant for a child who drifted off early and is already deep in the good sleep, and just needed this one little thing to make the night complete. Some of them are vast and slow and move through the dark with the enormous unhurried certainty of something that has been a long time lost and has not given up, and has now, finally, after all the wandering, found the light. Those are the big ones. The ones that have been out in the Somnian passage for so long that they no longer look quite like what they started out as. They have picked up things on their wandering, gathered the salt and the cold and the particular darkness of this passage, and woven them into themselves, so that when they arrive, they are richer than they were when they left, stranger and more layered. Those are the best ones to receive, though they are often the hardest to remember in the morning. The ones that feel, when they touch you, like something much larger than a single night's dream, like something that has been traveling a long time specifically for this, for you, for this particular night, when everything else was quiet enough to receive it. All of them coming toward the light, all of them finding their way, and through the light, finding you. The keeper in the room at the base of the tower sits in the chair beside the table with the small bowl of seawater and the floating flowers. The fire in the iron stove has burned down to embers now, deep red-orange, shifting very slightly as the stove breathes, throwing a warmth that is primarily felt rather than seen. The keeper holds the cup with both hands. There is a practice in certain contemplative traditions, not specific to any one religion or culture, found in some form in nearly all of the serious ones, of holding a warm cup with both hands and allowing the warmth of the cup to be the whole of your attention for a moment. Not thinking about the cup, not naming it or categorizing it or deciding anything about it. Just feeling it. The specific temperature of it against the specific skin of your specific palms. The slight weight of the liquid inside, which you can sense through the walls of the cup if your hands are still enough. The way the warmth distributes itself evenly across the entire contact surface between the cup and your hands, so that the warmth is not in one place, but everywhere at once. This is the practice. It is not a complicated practice. A child could do it, and children sometimes do before they are taught to stop. The complication is not in the doing of it, but in the undoing of everything else that fills the space in which it is done. The commentary, the planning, the background hum of self-assessment that most people in the waking world have running continuously from the moment they wake until the moment they finally lose consciousness, and sometimes even in the space between. The keeper does not have this background hum anymore. Or rather, it comes sometimes, as it comes for everyone. For it is a human thing, and the keeper has not stopped being human. But it comes the way weather comes on this island. It arrives, it has its brief time, and then it passes, because nothing holds on to anything here for very long. The wind moves the clouds through very efficiently. The tides bring things to shore and then take them back again. The seasons succeed each other with a completeness and a willingness that the waking world's seasons sometimes lack, lingering past their welcome or arriving before their time. Here, everything moves through. So the background hum comes and then it goes, and the keeper holds the cup and feels the warmth, and watches the embers breathe their slow red breathing and listens to the sea doing its patient work below the cliffs. And this moment in this room, on this island in the dark, is the whole of what there is. And it is enough. And it is more than enough. And the keeper is at peace. Outside, the beam turns, the sea breathes, the stars hold their positions, and in beds and on couches and in quiet rooms all over the sleeping world, in all the places where people have lain themselves down and given the dark their trust, the lost dreams are arriving. One by one, they come through the gate of horn, and they do their extraordinary quiet work, and the delta waves roll, and the body repairs itself, and the brain does what only the sleeping brain can do, consolidating the day's learning, archiving its emotional residue, running its deep tissue repair, releasing into the bloodstream the hormones of rest and renewal that the waking hours never quite permit. And tomorrow comes the way tomorrow always comes, with everything in it, all its requirements and its noise, and its beautiful occasional moments of grace. Tomorrow is real, and it will arrive. It will arrive, and when it does, you will carry with you something from this place. Not a memory exactly, not something you can point to or put into words when someone asks you how you slept. Something more like a quality of having been somewhere that received you entirely. A quality of having been, for the duration of a night, entirely held. The keeper knows this. Every person who has ever slept well, truly slept, the deep and rolling sleep of the delta stages, the sleep that leaves you feeling not just rested but restored, the way a room feels different after it has been properly cleaned and aired, and the light comes in clean and the air smells of outside. Every person who has ever woken from that kind of sleep and lain there for a moment in the simple pleasure of being alive and rested and not yet required to be anything at all, every one of them has been here, without knowing it without meaning to, simply by virtue of having been still enough and tired enough and willing enough to let the dark take over and the lighthouse find them. The keeper has seen so many of them arrive, and has watched from the lantern room the particular quality of light that surrounds a sleeping person when the right dreams reach them. It is not quite visible light, not the kind you could capture in a photograph. More like a warmth in the dark, a slight brightening of the space around the sleeping form, as though the body recognizes what has come for it and responds with a quiet gladness. The keeper loves this work, not in the way one loves an achievement, not in the way one loves a reputation or a result or a record that stands, in the way one loves a practice, for its dailiness, for its repetition, for the fact that it asks you to show up and do the same thing again and again and again, and that the showing up is the whole of it, and that the showing up is, in its accumulation, the most meaningful thing you can do. The beam that turned last night will turn again tonight and will turn again tomorrow night. Not forever. Nothing is forever. But for now, reliably and completely. And in each turning, it will find something that needed finding. And that something will reach its destination. And someone somewhere will sleep better than they might have. The keeper finds this entirely sufficient. But that is tonight. Tonight is the keeper and the fire and the sea and the turning light. Tonight is the shingle beach and the stars and the night-blooming flowers open in the valley. Tonight is the extraordinary country that lives between your last waking thought and your first dreaming one. And you're standing on its shore right now. And everything is very still. Let the stillness have you. This is the last thing the keeper says to everyone who arrives here. Not advice exactly, more like a permission. Because stillness, in the world most of us come from, is something we have been trained to resist. Stillness looks like inaction. Stillness looks like falling behind. Stillness looks like the pause that lets other people get ahead, lets the work pile up, lets the moment pass while you are standing still in it, instead of moving through it toward the next one. But the keeper has been here long enough to know, and this is one of those things that only comes from being still enough and long enough in one place for true understanding to arrive, which understanding cannot be rushed and cannot be taught by argument, only received by experience. The keeper knows that stillness is not the opposite of action. It is the ground in which all useful action grows. You cannot grow anything in exhausted soil. You cannot draw water from a well that has been pumped dry. The rest is not the opposite of the work. The rest is what makes the work possible, and the work is what makes the rest necessary, and the two of them together are one thing. The way the in-breath and the out-breath are one thing. You cannot have one without the other. You cannot keep drawing out without putting back. The lighthouse knows this, the island knows this, and some part of you, the part that found its way here tonight through the dark of the Somnian passage, following the beam of the turning light, that part of you knows it too. And the light from the lighthouse sweeps across you one more time, warm and steady and certain, and then the dark comes back. And the dark is not something to be afraid of. The dark is where the real sleep is, and you are here, and the lighthouse is turning, and the dreams are on their way. I will leave you now, my friend. The night is long and full of good rest, and it is all yours. Every deep, slow wave of it, every minute of the extraordinary restoration that happens when you trust the dark enough to let it do its work. There's nothing to manage here, nothing to oversee, nothing to ensure. The body knows what to do in the dark. It has always known. Long before there were lighthouse keepers or dream guides or sleep stories or any of the 100 things we build to help each other find the way, the body was finding the way on its own, every night, reliably and completely. You're in good hands, the oldest hands there are. Your own bodies, the nights, the ancient rhythm of the sea that is in your blood. Because in the beginning, all of life came from the sea, and some part of you has never forgotten this, which is why the sound of waves makes you calmer, without you knowing why. and why the smell of salt air does what it does to the chest, and why lying on your back and looking at the stars produces that particular feeling of something very large gently placing you down and covering you over. Sleep well. Sleep deeply. Sleep all the way down to where the delta waves are. And when the lighthouse finds you, and it will find you, it always does, the beam is patient and it sweeps every corner of the dark. Turn toward it. Follow it in. Come to shore. Lie on the cool gray stones for a while with the stars overhead and the sea at your feet and the flowers scenting the night air. And then close your eyes and let the morning be a long time coming. Good night, my friend. I am so glad you're here. Thank you so much for spending this night with us here on Moondrift Sleep. If this story brought you a little closer to the shore of rest, please take a moment to leave a like. It means the world to us, and it helps more people find their way to this little island in the dark. And if you want to be here every night, if you want the Lighthouse to be here for you, whenever you need it, please consider subscribing to Moondrift Sleep. Every week we sail out to find another story worth telling in the dark. We'll leave the light on for you.